Shocking statement. A Chief Justice accused of selling verdicts. A regime alleged to partner with the FARC to flood the US with cocaine. And a money trail that runs straight through American banks. Tonight, we unpack how US investigators say Venezuela's highest court became a criminal enterprise. Why Maikel Moreno faces money laundering charges in Florida. How an auto plant seizure became leverage for bribes. And how sanctions-busting flights and crypto weave into the scheme. Watch to see how task forces use wiretaps, undercover ops, and OFAC designations to choke off the cash. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. How does a Supreme Court turn into a toll booth where verdicts have a price tag? Start with a Chief Justice who controls case assignments, timing, and which panels hear which disputes. Add a network of trusted intermediaries who know which levers to pull. Then insert money, quietly, through bank wires and couriers who speak in codes and meet in offices where phones stay outside. The allegation is simple in shape and complex in practice. Justice becomes a service, and fees move the line. Federal prosecutors in the Southern District of Florida charged Maikel Moreno with conspiracy to commit money laundering tied to case outcomes. The case files describe flows of funds that allegedly track alongside rulings, dismissals, and releases. The charge is not about a single payment, it's about a pattern. Lawyers approach fixers. Fixers name a price, and the price doesn't appear in any court ledger. When the money clears, paperwork moves, hearings get rescheduled, and a new order appears with a signature that carries the state's seal. A Chief Justice is supposed to be the final guardrail. The office sets standards, shields lower judges from political pressure, and protects due process. The allegation flips that duty. Instead of insulation, access becomes the currency. Official immunity, meant to safeguard independence, allegedly turns into cover for decisions that map neatly onto private transfers. The robe still represents law, but the leverage sits in who pays, not who argues best. Here's how the mechanism is described. A litigant with a criminal exposure faces a pretrial detention review. Their counsel doesn't file a better motion. They contact a handler known for resolving cases. Funds route through layered accounts. A local shell, then a foreign exchange broker, then a dollar account in Miami or New York. Within days, the docket shows an accelerated hearing. The detention order gets vacated on procedural grounds. The paperwork cites a technical defect that was present for months, but urgency appears only after the transfer. No names, no specifics beyond the channels and timing, but the sequence repeats enough times to form a template. Investigators point to bank records to stitch that template together. Large transfers land in U.S. accounts linked by ownership, signatory authority, or consistent beneficiary data. The inflows don't match an official salary. They align with luxury spending, designer retail, premium real estate deposits, and high-end travel. The purchases are not private indulgences in the abstract. They function as conversion tools. Influence becomes leather, steel, and square footage. Once money hits a cleared account, it moves into cars, watches, and property, which can be pledged, resold, or used as a store of value abroad. The spending patterns tell their own story. A government paycheck is predictable. These payments spike around key rulings, then cool, then spike again. Card statements show bursts at boutiques the week after a decision, then deposits to escrow tied to a condominium miles from any courthouse. Wire descriptors reference consulting and legal services that never appear on public ledgers. The rhythm is the point. It is hard to hide timing when decisions are stamped and money leaves footprints across borders. Now extend that rhythm beyond one defendant. If a court can unlock a jail cell for a price, it can also tilt a civil dispute that decides who holds a factory, a mine, or a shipping concession. Foreign investors track risk through courts more than headlines. If a judge's pen can override contracts with the same speed that money clears, the cost of doing business becomes a negotiation with gatekeepers, not a calculation of law. Human rights cases face the same wall. If relief depends on a payment channel, victims stand in the wrong line. The immediate payoff for understanding this scheme is plain. U.S. financial records allegedly show millions flowing into accounts tied to Moreno. Those records give prosecutors a map with dates, amounts, and counterparties, and that map lines up with outcomes that carry a seal and a signature. A pay-to-play bench doesn't require a confession when the ledgers already match the rulings. If verdicts can be bought, consider what happens when the target is not a person, but a factory. Why would a car plant become a bargaining chip in a courtroom? Because when court orders can be steered, a factory's fate turns into a revenue stream. The reported seizure and sale of a General Motors plant in Venezuela became a test case. Investigators describe a legal action that did not simply resolve a dispute but unlocked a transaction. The allegation ties the court's authority to a private cut, turning a judicial decision into the first step of a business deal. A signature cleared the way, a sale followed. The point wasn't policy or industrial strategy, it was extraction. Here's how the mechanics line up in the materials. A case advances in a civil chamber, swift and decisive. A seizure order lands like a hammer, giving control of the plant and its assets to court-appointed hands. Those hands are not random. They sit close to the people who can move files and schedule hearings. The order creates urgency. Inventory must be secured, accounts must be frozen, titles must be transferred. Once the gate is open, buyers appear with unusual speed. Paperwork moves through notaries who know the playbook, and proceeds start their journey. The complaint says that the chief judicial decision-maker stood to receive a percentage of those proceeds. That claim connects a court act to personal profit, not as a rumor, but as a mapped flow of funds. Multinational firms arrive expecting contracts to hold. They budget for taxes, labor disputes, and currency problems. They don't budget for a bench that doubles as a marketplace. The allegation is that outcomes were priced, and seizures could be directed to yield cash for insiders. When a plant worth hundreds of millions can be redirected by a single order, a company's legal strategy becomes irrelevant. Negotiation moves from boardrooms to back channels. The questions stop being about law and start being about cost. The sequence alleged around the GM plant follows a familiar arc in corruption cases. Court action enables possession. Temporary custodians become permanent controllers. Insiders identify buyers who will not ask questions about how assets changed hands. Bribes and kickbacks move through layers designed to blur origin and destination. A local intermediary collects in bolívares or dollars. Funds hop to a foreign exchange dealer. Then they enter a bank account held by a shell company under a nominee's name. From there, wires head into the US financial system or other stable jurisdictions. Each hop adds distance between the court order and the personal gain, but the timestamps tell on the scheme. Decision, transfer, sale, payout, stacked in that order. That signal doesn't stay inside one plant. Other firms watch and log the lesson. Invest at your own risk, because legal redress is for sale. In practical terms, that means higher hurdle rates, withheld expansion, and contingency plans to exit. Capital leaves quickly and returns slowly, if at all. Foreign direct investment prefers countries where judges are boring and predictable. When courts look like cash registers, the cost of insurance rises, debt becomes more expensive, and the pool of willing investors shrinks. Factories pause procurement. Suppliers demand payment up front. Talent migrates to places where a work contract means something in court. Investigative materials outline the texture of the payments. Briefcases filled to avoid wires that might trigger alerts. Coded messages that read like routine legal updates but carry dollar figures and deadlines. Offshore routing through Caribbean incorporations with nominee directors who sign everything but own nothing. Proceeds converted into hard assets, vehicles, real estate deposits, high-end goods, to lock in value outside of volatile currency. Each element is mundane on its own. Together, they form a system. Court power on the front end, laundering on the back end. If a factory can be turned into a payoff, the next step writes itself. International sanctions alter which banks will touch a wire. Crypto offers a lane to move value without a correspondent bank. Private jets provide fast, quiet travel for decision-makers and couriers. The tools change, the goal doesn't. Keep the money flowing and hard to seize. This is why investigators point to the GM case as a model, not a one-off. It shows how state power and judicial sway can be monetized with a clean public act and a dirty private ledger. A court order looks official. The kickback looks like a consulting fee. That blend lets a scheme pass as governance while it strips an asset. From factories to flight plans, the financial networks don't stop at the courthouse door. What do private jets and a crypto regulator have to do with cleaning dirty money? They show you how illicit cash moves when banks say no. When courts become revenue engines, the money doesn't sit still. It moves through airports, charters, shell accounts, and digital wallets, looking for a path that stays ahead of compliance. That is where the El Dorado Financial Crimes Task Force comes in. It pulls agents from multiple agencies into one room and points them at the same target list. Funds tied to Venezuelan officials that touch the U.S. system. The work is not abstract. They follow invoices for charters, escrow accounts for aircraft leases, and bank messages that flag when a payment brushes a sanctions filter. Sanctioned actors adapted. They leaned on private flights for sensitive missions, used intermediaries to book services, and routed payments to avoid blocked names. Regulations under the Kingpin Act cut off access, but gaps appear when a broker lists a plane under a holding company, or a payment travels through a vendor who claims not to know the end user. The playbook markets anonymity as a service. You see it when a charter is paid by a management firm in one country, fueled on credit by another, and flown for a passenger who never shows on a manifest by name. Crypto adds another path. Value can move without a traditional correspondent bank, and that tempts anyone locked out of dollars. A superseding indictment lays out one set of flights tied to political campaigning. It alleges that Tarek El Aissami and Joselit Ramirez Camacho coordinated with U.S. persons to arrange transportation supporting Maduro's 2018 run, even though U.S. rules blocked that. The research is direct on the legal bar. As a result of OFAC's SDNT designations, U.S. persons were prohibited from engaging in any transactions involving funds or property in which El Aissami had an interest. It also notes that this prohibition covered payments, services, and transportation services, and that the Kingpin Act forbids evading or attempting to evade those blocks. That language defines the red lines. The allegation is that actors stepped over them using intermediaries who masked the true customer. How do investigators push back? They wiretap phones that coordinate charters and fuel uplifts. They run undercover approaches to test whether a broker will take a sanctioned client with the name scrubbed. They issue OFAC designations that freeze assets in motion, so a payment stuck in a correspondent bank never reaches the plane handler. When a target tries to rebrand, the designation follows the control person, not just the logo. Each move builds a financial map. Dates, tail numbers, routing, and who touched the money at each hop.